Hey hockey players, Coach Garner here from hockeytraining.com. In this video, I want to talk about what it takes for you to prepare for the most productive offseason you have ever had. It all begins with a plan. Okay, you need to have a plan in order for the offseason to be as productive as humanly possible so that next competitive season you can come in a completely different hockey player. I always explain to my athletes, I really see the offseason as an area of opportunity for you to really get a leg up on your opponents. Off season for the typical athlete is going to be anywhere, say, from 4 to even 6 months at a time. Most hockey players do one of two things or a combination of them both. They're either going to not leave the hockey training really too late. They're going to train maybe late July or perhaps early August and then hope to make some changes by the time September comes around. Or B, they're not actually training like a hockey player. Okay? Write this down. We aren't in the gym to be better weightlifters. We are in the gym to be better hockey players. That is how your training has to be represented. We need certain general physical qualities that everybody needs, right? Strength, power, body fat loss, body composition management, speed, conditioning. All of these things are, I would consider to be general. They can help you in your hockey game, but they are to be considered general. But after a point within your training, you have to start getting more specific with very specific outputs that are specific for your hockey training. Making sure your energy system demand within your conditioning matches what you're going to use out on the ice and represents what recovery you need in between plays and in between shifts. Making sure that your speed training is correlated to actual on-ice speed and not just correlated to running faster or jumping higher. And making sure your weight training is working on the different issues hockey players run into and complementing the strengths that are going to benefit them on the ice. It is a very different thing to train like a hockey player than it is to, say, join your football team and whatever workout they're doing to get ready for the season, or to do a workout out of a magazine, or do whatever your buddy's doing because he has bodybuilding goals, or whatever it's going to be. Training for hockey is very different, and you need a periodized hockey plan. So you can't just have a hockey training plan and run that for the entire offseason. No, periodization means that it needs to be segmented. Okay, ideally, what I do for my athletes, depending on when they join the off season, it's anywhere going to be from a 4 to 6 phase process, and every phase builds upon the next and builds upon to a point where when we get to the competitive season, that hockey athlete is at peak performance because each phase built upon the next in order to get the qualities we need that are going to represent themselves out on the ice. Okay, so number one, you have to train like a hockey player throughout this off season, and even your preparation for the off season also needs to be hockey specific, believe it or not. So that leads us right into the introductory phase. Okay, the introductory phase has got a lot of science behind it, but I really want to break it down real quick for you here in this video. The introductory phase is all about it's essentially creating the physiological environment in a slingshot. So you're preparing yourself, you're pulling back the band so that you can slingshot into your off-season training and make more progress and have more productivity in the gym than you've ever had before. That's what the introductory phase is all about, slingshotting you so that your subsequent phases are that much more effective. How do we create the slingshot? Well, it's a combination of a lot of things here. First and foremost, we've got these two. We have recovery and regeneration. So the research is quite clear here that active recovery is in many cases more productive towards recovery than just sleeping and eating and doing nothing. Meaning, moving in the correct ways at the correct intensities can recover your body faster from the grind of the in-season than just sitting down, sleeping, eating, and doing nothing. So making sure you're moving at the right intensities will actually get you feeling better, way faster. So this is recovery of not only the muscle system, but it's also recovery of the nervous system. We need to recover both in order to adequately prepare ourselves for a successful off-season. Regeneration. This active recovery phase is also excellent for regeneration of nagging injuries that you likely incurred during the season. This could be sore tendons, sore ligaments, strains in the muscles, pulls in the muscles, mobility issues, tightnesses in certain areas of your body. I know a lot of hockey athletes that come to me, they've got tightnesses mainly in their hips, groin, hamstrings, and actually their shoulders. Getting rid of these things and getting rid of these nagging injuries helps us regenerate from those injuries and recover so that we are pain-free within our training, but then also just recover our body so that we're in a position that allows us to train hard and still effectively recover from. Because let me tell you something about the off-season and any training that you do. You aren't what you can perform. You only are what you can effectively recover from. Ever see guys training really hard and they don't have a whole lot to show for it? Yeah, that's somebody who's not recovering from their training at an adequate basis, okay? You only are what you can recover from, and that's a part of this slingshot. We're preparing your body to increase your maximum recoverable training volume by the time we get into the off season. Next here, what does this introductory phase kind of look like? We know the point of it. We want to have recovery and regeneration, but what are some of the actual tools that we're using within this phase? Well, we want to focus on structural balance. Hockey is a unilateral sport, meaning you're spending way more time on one side of your body than the other. You're always shooting on one side. You're always passing on one side. You're always decelerating forces on one side. So you're receiving passes or you're deflecting shots. Your takeoff leg is typically always the same takeoff leg. You're always holding the stick in one side of the body. This unilateral aspect of hockey creates what are known as structural imbalances within the body. And hockey players notoriously have structural imbalances within their shoulders, within their core, because you're only ever really twisting in one direction when you're out on the ice. For example, loading a slap shot. Structural imbalances within the legs because the skating pattern is much different than a running pattern because the toes are pointed slightly outwards. It creates a structural imbalance within both the hamstrings and the quadriceps. And there's just a lot of structural imbalances, okay? If you only work on one side of your body, you're only get strong on one side of your body. So introduction really needs to focus on bringing some of these structural issues up so that when you get into the gym, you're going to decrease your risk of injury. You're also going to be able to move a lot more weight around. If your one side of your body is stronger than the other, or if one side of your body is tighter than the other, you're opening yourself up for technical issues. You're opening yourself up for an increased susceptibility of injury in the gym when we're trying to become better hockey players. So in the introduction, to create the slingshot for more productive training, let's balance out the upper body with the lower body, and let's balance out the left side of the body with the right side of the body. We also need to create some more stability. For example, a hockey player spends 6 months of the season in a hockey boot. In a boot, your ankle is stuck, right? It's stuck at that 90-degree thing. Your ankle can lose a lot of its own ankle stability throughout such a long competitive season because you're not relying on ankle stability because the boot holds you in there. You're using your quadriceps and your glutes and your hip extension and your calves in order to propel you on the ice, whereas your foot kind of just stays still throughout that process. Whereas, for example, if you watch a runner, there is dorsiflexion and extension throughout that entire process when they're running. Okay, so creating stability in the areas that lose stability, and there's plenty in hockey players during the competitive season, is another thing we need to do to improve the overall structural integrity of their body, which is ultimately going to improve the quality of their training, and then ultimately going to improve their athletic prowess out on the ice. Lastly, the mobility. Right? Mobility is the intersection of strength, flexibility, and stability. It's just conversation for another day. But mobility for hockey athletes tend to need immediately postseason for sure a little bit of extra mobility within the lower body and the upper body in order to start feeling fluid again. right? That grind of the season, you really have nagging injuries can hold back that mobility, but also the structural issues within the body hold back mobility to a large degree. And mobility circuits, I particularly like aerobic-based mobility circuits. We can get an aerobic conditioning workout at the same time as we work on our mobility. So it's not just the normal boring mobility session that a lot of people don't like to do before their training. We get a little bit of conditioning, a little bit of fat loss out of it, and that's something that hockey players really need. Enhanced mobility, some more fat loss going into the off season, because during the season you can put on a little bit of body fat with all the travel and all the eating out and the lack of probably being in the gym for the last 6 months. These are all things that start to paint the picture and start tying everything together. As you guys are seeing, we're building a body that is going to be prepared for the best training possible. Looking at periodization for hockey, it really all comes down to general physical preparedness and then ultimately into what's known as specific physical preparedness. So you want to look at general physical preparedness as the basic qualities that athletes need to have. They need to have muscle mass, they need to have strength, they need to have power, they need to have conditioning, they need to have speed, they need to have mobility, they need to have coordination, they need to be structurally balanced to prevent injury, all of these things. So we're creating a general fitness within athletes. And then the periodization plan ultimately leads to the scenario where a general base of fitness in the beginning of the off season slowly becomes much more specific to the demands of hockey that I discussed earlier. We want to match all the specific needs for hockey players that we know from the scientific literature, from the training literature, and from my experience working with thousands of hockey athletes to get them the best results. That's how periodization generally should be looking within the off season. We start with GPP, we slowly segment our way into SPP, and that leads to the best hockey athletes come time for the next competitive season. Why am I giving you this rant here? Because I want you to start now, okay? Starting GPP, you can't start GPP and then expect in 4 weeks to be ready for SPP, okay? There's a long gradual process that you need to create hybrid systems the entire way in both your resistance training and your conditioning in order to optimize your hockey performance, okay? Start now, okay? Start early. Don't wait for this. Once this stuff is all applied, introductory phase, I typically allow athletes to work on it anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you've got a lot of mobility issues, and then 2 days completely off training, and then we go into testing. It's very important to test, because if you don't test, you don't know where you're starting. If you don't know where you're starting, you don't know where you need to go. So something that's included in the off-season hockey package for hockeytraining.com is I created a manual this year to give you guys assessments that you can use for both body composition, but also for hockey-specific performance parameters. So hockey athletes of the off-season domination system this year for hockeytraining.com, they're going to be testing body fat percentage, how much muscle they have, their aerobic conditioning, their lactic conditioning, their alactic conditioning, their power output, their actual upper body specific output within the game, their lower body specific output within the game. All of these things are tested so that we know where you're at in the beginning of the off season, and then we know what you need to work on. We retest them halfway through the off season and make sure you're making progress on those weak points, because let me tell you something, you're only as strong as your weakest link in the chain. If something's holding you back, you got to work on it, or that's always going to hold you back. So we test immediately. All right, you guys, this is how I want you to start your hockey off season. These are the things you have to have in mind. This is how I want you to structure it. If you want my take on it and you want a totally free introductory phase from me and hockey training, then we got a link for you in the description below for free introductory phase hockey training. All right? Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed the content.